Individual rites to passage. The birth of a Kikuyu baby was the signal for the first of many rites to passage that would mark the child's whole life. A new individual had become a potential member of the tribe, but it was realized that in its early years the child was really little more than a part of its mother and wholly dependent upon her. Therefore, the ceremonies that marked the birth were designed to emphasize the child's connection with its mother, and until the child underwent the next rite to passage, he or she was identified with the mother in all respects. If its mother became ceremonially unclean, the child was also rendered unclean, and if its mother had to take part in any ceremony, the child took part as well. There was no hard and fast rule which fixed the age at which a Kikuyu child took part in the next rite to passage, the rebirth ceremony, save only that this had to take place before he or she could proceed to the following stage. Ordinarily, it was performed at about the age of 5, but among members of the Ukabi Initiation Guild, it took place earlier. The significance of the second birth ceremony as a rite to passage is that it marked the severing of the special ties which bound a child 12 to his or her mother and identified the child with her. The child passed, in fact, into a wider life, in which he or she became an individual member of the family in his or her own right, with responsibilities towards all others' family, or in the case of children of matrilineal marriages, to all the members of the mother's father's family. During this stage of life, however, there was no responsibility to the community beyond the family, except that all boys, after the second birth ceremony, had certain duties towards the members of the warrior regiment that was in power. For the next rite to passage in the life of an individual of either sex was initiation. This prolonged ceremony, starting with a preliminary training and ending with the period of the novitiate, was probably the most important in the life of any individual and marked the passage from childhood to adult status. It was the beginning of much broader and more important responsibilities to the community outside of the family. At initiation, each boy and girl became bound by very special ties to all the other boys and girls who were initiated in the same lodge, and by only slightly less important ties to all those who were initiated in the same year, and who thereby became members of the same initiation age group. Henceforth, loyalty and service to other members of the same age group was just as important as loyalty and service to the family. For the individual, the next rite to passage was marriage. For every male, the marriage of a first wife was a matter of the greatest importance, and was marked by special rites and ceremonies, which were far more important than the mere transfer of marriage payments from the man's family to that of his bride. In the case of the marriage of a second or later wife, there was a modified ceremony which marked the passage into the next stage of life, but this affected only the new bride, for the bridegroom had entered upon this phase of his life at the first marriage. After marriage, there was only one more rite to passage for women, that which accompanied death and the passing into the world of departed spirits. For men, however, there were important intermediate rites to passage. First came the payment of a fee which made him a council elder of the first or junior grade, which was a kind of apprenticeship to the status of elder. Then came the payment of the second fee, which entitled the man to take an active part in the proceedings of the council assemblies, and finally came initiation as a third-grade elder, which no man could enter until he had a child old enough for initiation. Upon initiation as a third-grade elder, a man assumed considerable responsibilities to the community for keeping law and order, and for the administration of justice. While a man was a member of the 2 junior grades of the council, his attendance at council meetings was optional, and he had no special duties to perform, such as administering oaths or making peace between rival warrior parties. But once a man had become a third-grade elder, he had to assume these duties, and he could not refuse to attend a council meeting if called upon to do so, unless he had very pressing reasons in the form of urgent business. Moreover, as a third-grade elder, every man had responsibilities connected with religion, the conducting of certain types of purification, 5 ceremonies, and duties in connection with conducting the affairs of the country as a whole. For those who had reached and passed the prime of life, death came as the final rite of passage, and marked the passage of an individual from the material to the spirit world. Those whom death overtook prematurely also passed to the spirit world, but the rite to passage that accompanied their death was a much modified one, because the normal sequence of rites to passage that should have punctuated the interval between birth and death had not been completed. 13 Death for the Kikuyu was not the end of all things, but simply marked the passage of the individual into yet one more stage of life. In the spirit world, responsibilities were not discarded, but were, if anything, strengthened, especially those towards the family. Group rites to passage, quite distinct from the rites to passage, which punctuated the life of the individuals, which marked the progress of groups of individuals, and which corresponded with the assumption by the groups of new powers and responsibilities towards the community. When a new initiation age group had been formed as a result of a series of initiation ceremonies throughout the country, it became part of the junior warrior regiment that was as yet incomplete. Each warrior regiment had to be made up of 9 initiation age groups, and although the members of all initiation age groups assumed individual responsibilities to the community at their initiation, the junior regiment that was in the process of formation had no direct responsibilities or powers, and was subject to the authority of the senior or complete warrior regiment. As soon as a new warrior regiment of 9 initiation age groups was complete, ceremonies took place which marked the assumption of power, authority, and responsibility by the new regiment, and the retirement of the senior regiment. These ceremonies might be regarded as a form of group rite of passage. In each territorial unit throughout South Kikuyu of the new regiment took part in such a ceremony, so that the whole regiment was associated in the rite of passage, not only through the selected representatives, but also through the payment of fees by all individuals. This step marked the shifting from one regiment to another of responsibility for military protection and defense, for the punishment of theft and witchcraft, P6, for general police duties, and for the organization of social activities such as dancing and kibara assemblies. Although each new regiment, on taking over power, assumed these duties and responsibilities corporately, the members had the right to delegate the control and power to smaller committees called Njama Cia Arnake, the Warriors' Council. In each territorial unit, the warriors who belonged to the regiment that was in power appointed such a committee to act for them, organize them, and lead them. But these committees were responsible to the warriors who appointed them, and if they were unsatisfactory, they could be deposed and new committees elected. The members of each territorial committee in turn then selected 1 or 2 of their number as delegates to a committee, Njama, to represent the warrior regiment as a whole. The last group rite of passage was that which marked the coming into power of a new generation riika, age group, and the retirement of the generation that had held office for the past 30 or more years. When the time came for a new ruling generation to control of the country, the members of that generation in each territorial unit that was about to assume new rights and responsibilities appointed representative delegates from each territorial unit, who then assembled as a committee and appointed from among themselves delegates to take part in the actual ceremony. The ceremony took place in the Fort Hall district of Kikuyu country, in the region of the Kikuyu traditional center of origin, Mukuru wa Gathanga. This rite of passage marked the assumption, by all those who were represented by the delegates, of important responsibilities to the community and the tribe. Individual rites of passage, the birth of a Kikuyu baby, was the signal for the first of many rites of passage that would mark the child's whole life. A new individual had become a potential member of the tribe, but it was realized that in its early years the child was really little more than a part of its mother, and wholly dependent upon her. Therefore, the ceremonies that marked the birth were designed to emphasize the child's connection with its mother, and until the child underwent the next rite of passage, he or she was identified with the mother in all respects. If its mother became ceremonially unclean, the child was also rendered unclean, and if its mother had to take part in any ceremony, the child took part as well. There was no hard and fast rule which fixed the age at which a Kikuyu child took part in the next rite of passage, the rebirth ceremony, save only that this had to take place before he or she could proceed to the following stage. Ordinarily, it was performed at about the age of 5, but among members of the Ukabi Initiation Guild, it took place earlier. The significance of the second birth ceremony as a rite of passage is that it marked the severing of the special ties which bound a child 12 to his or her mother and identified